Hey guys, welcome back to System Breakdowns. As always, I'm Greg Koval. Before we get started, I want to remind you, please smash the subscribe button, click the like button, leave comments, let me know what you think, and let me know how these system breakdowns are working for you. Now that being said, I want to get right into today's material. We're talking about Stipe Miocic. One of my personal favorites. I'm from Cleveland, so he's a hometown boy. I can't help but love the fact that his success has been amazing. But even if he were not a Cleveland guy, I would certainly cover him because his systems are phenomenal, and it's one of the reasons that he is easily one of the greatest heavyweights of all time, if not the greatest heavyweight of all time. And a lot of that is once again, you talk about a guy who's a very simple system, but it is one that plays to his strengths and keeps away from his weaknesses. And when you talk about building a system, that's what you want. You want a system that's going to put you in a position to fight your kind of fight all the time, and that's what he does really well. And we're going to talk about that today. To begin with, let's cover what his strengths are, just a quick recap. Obviously, he's a Division I wrestler, so he's got a fantastic wrestling game. He's taken down some really fantastic guys, including Daniel Cormier, who's no joke, obviously. Uh, there's also his Golden Gloves boxing, that as a boxing champion, he's a fantastic striker. He has very, very heavy hands, and he has a very tough chin. And also, finally, he's one of the taller guys in the heavyweight division. With an 80-inch reach, he can outreach a lot of the other heavyweights. So that's really played to his strengths, especially throughout his career. We talk about guys like Daniel Cormier. You talk about Mark Hunt. You talk about Big Country, Roy Nelson. These are guys that he's been able to outreach and use that long jab cross to his success. But we're going to talk about that later. That being said, his system basically breaks down into 4 components that I'm going to break it down into today. The first one is I always like to cover defense and what his strategy is. And when you talk about Stipe, that's also going to go right into counters. So defense and counters all kind of falls into one system for him. And then secondly, I'm going to talk about energy drain and how he wears guys down. Anybody who saw the Francis Ngannou fight, that is like the best example of like what he does for an energy drain. And we're going to talk about why he did that and why it works so well, especially for heavyweights. The third thing that we're going to talk about is the putting on pressure and alleviating pressure to constantly put the fight where he wants and draw them into, I call it funneling, where you draw them into your kind of fight and you make their actions predictable and thus easier to counter. And one of the ways he does that is through pressure, by putting on and then alleviating pressure or forcing them to push back on him. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then the final thing we're going to talk about is the clinch system that he uses, that his clinches, takedowns, and then jiu-jitsu, and what he does to get them to the ground, what he does when he gets them on the ground, and what he does up against the cage. So that being said, let's get right to it. So let's go into part number 1. All right, guys. There's a lot I want to talk about in this, so I want to start with defense, because defense is a big part of any system. If you look at my system that I implement, part of what makes me so successful as a fighter is I'm very, very hard to hit. I'm very elusive. I'm very good at range control. And we talk about the highest echelon fighters. They all have a system in place that plays to their strengths that gives them a very, very strong defensive advantage so that they're very hard to hit. And Stipe is no exception. But what he does is he uses defense to set up counter strikes. The majority of what he likes to do is strong counter striking. So that being said, let's get right into it. There's a couple things that he likes to do a lot. One is, in boxing, you have this kind of strong, tight guard that you can use to block a lot. He doesn't use that as much. He keeps his hands in tight, but a lot of what he's going to do is if he gets pressured, he's going to use this long, open guard and get his head back like we talked about with John Jones and some of these other guys, where he's going to get out of range, and he usually uses that to set up a counter. And while he's here, it makes him very hard to hit. So it's head movement and footwork where you'll see him run away from stuff when he gets pressured. And he uses that run away to lure them in for a counter strike. But mostly what you'll see him do is angle changes and head movement. He is awesome at these things. And they're not fast, but what they are is smooth and precise. The way that he'll generally do this is he'll usually do a slight lean here because he wants the jab. Because he knows he can slip the jab. And then from here, a lot of times he'll roll under and start hitting a 45. Or he'll slip the jab and come to the outside and counter strike out of 45. Those 45s, he is awesome at. And he's talked about that before, that guys who are like, I'm going to go in there and pummel him. He's like, dude, they're not going to be able to beat my angles. Because he is really good at doing this. He knows what he has to evade. His first attack, he's going to try to get that jab out first because then he can slip it. Now he knows it's either a cross or a hook, so he's going to roll under and maybe roll under a second time if he has to. Either way, most of it is just slip, roll under, and start hitting the 45. Man, that strategy works really, really well for him. In the case of Francis Ngannou, there's a great video, if you watch, there's a point in that fight where he gets backed up against the wall, and you literally see him here waiting for it, drawing it up, slip, roll under, big cross, and Ngannou just couldn't hit him. And making guys miss is a really important part of his strategy that we're going to talk about at Energy Drain. The other thing that he does a lot really, really well is sliding just out of range and counter-striking. He doesn't like to block a lot. He likes to make them miss. Like I said, we'll talk about that in Energy Drain. It's very important. He'll get them to throw something, get just out of range, and throw his big counter cross. That is huge. He uses this a lot, especially when guys start chasing him. He comes just out of range, and then he comes back in with his 80-inch reach, which gives him an advantage in height. Okay? That works fantastically well. The combination of his head movement and hitting angles and sliding just out of range to counterpunch allows him to land way more shots than his opponents. And that is the biggest part of his defense that I want you to take away from this. So what I want you to take away from it and put into your sparring is just focus on drawing out a shot, slip, roll under, stepping out, hitting an angle, or slide just out of range and come in with your own counter punch. Very, very important stuff. And then if you do get backed up, using that long open guard to avoid getting hit. Because like I said, it's not like boxing where I can stand here, stay close. Can't do that. MMA, they're going to drive right through it because you have too much hole with 4-ounce gloves, or you know what I mean, those small gloves, you just drive right through it. So instead, getting out of range and picking your moment, okay? So that is part one, which is defense. The next thing we're going to talk about in the next section is we're going to start getting into energy drain. So this is really, really important stuff. Okay guys, part two is energy drain. Man, we talked about in part one that he makes them miss a lot, partially because it's a better defensive tactic. When you got guys who have incredible knockout power, everybody he fights, whether it's Francis Ngannou, Daniel Cormier, Mark Hunt, Big Country Royals, everybody that he fights, Glover Teixeira, Alistair Overeem, these guys all have one-punch knockout power. Every single guy he fights. So he's got to be very tactical in how he fights them and drain that energy a little bit. An energy drain on heavyweights is a really useful tactic because that lactic acidosis is so much worse for them because they're carrying so much muscle. That's why guys like Brock Lesnar, if you can get past round one, you're in pretty good shape. You just got to get past round one. And so his strategy of not blocking, but forcing them to miss by sliding just out of range, by slipping and rolling under and then cutting an angle and countering, making them chase him, this is all part of that. If you can make a guy miss a lot, it's very draining to him. So if you're ever fighting a bigger guy, make him miss. Make him miss a lot. And then they're going to get tired. And what's going to happen is those hands are going to start to drop. They're going to start punching not as hard. They're going to stop being able to chase you as quickly. And then you kind of do what you want with them. And that's what he does. And the best example of this was the Francis Ngannou fight, where he implemented the energy drain strategy so well that Ngannou couldn't do anything to him. And honestly, like people talked about rematches with him, Ngannou would never be able to beat him in 100 years because this strategy is so effective. And so, here's part one we talked about missing. Another thing that he'll do is he works the body to disrupt breathing. And I'm not just talking about the Daniel Cormier fight where he hit him with the body shots and knocked him out. He'll mix it in there anyway. You know, when he's in here, pop, 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 he'll hit those body shots periodically, you know, just to start to work and disrupt their breathing a little bit. If you can start doing that, it's very, very effective at causing them to wear out quicker. Another thing that he'll do is shooting for a lot of takedowns. When he shoots in, he'll do blast doubles where he'll chase him all the way across the ring, get the takedown, and then force them to carry his weight to get back up. He'll also do a lot of cage grinding against guys who he wants to wear him down. He does it to Cormier and everybody else. He likes working against the cage a lot because he knows that's a tiring position trying to fight off the wall. And so he uses that to advantage. But in addition to that, he also does a lot of feints on the takedowns because he knows that if he can do a half effort on a takedown and make them do a full effort, it's a lot more draining to them. So I'll explain what I mean. So with Mark Hunt, he got really lucky because he got him into a loop where he just hit that outside single, kept popping the corner, and then counter punching him, and Mark Hunt kept falling for it. But in other fights, he's done this where he'll hit a single leg, get a really good single leg, get them down, and then the next time when they get back up, after they spend all that energy getting back up, you know, he'll come in here and he's boxing and he's sliding just out of range, and then he'll feint a takedown. He'll put about 60% effort into it and force them to expend a lot of energy to get out of it. If they don't expend the energy, really forcing themselves out of it, he'll finish it. That's okay. That's great for him. He wants that even more. But if not, he spends half as much energy as them, and they're constantly having to deal with this. In the meantime, they're constantly threatened by a takedown, so it makes his boxing more elusive, and it makes him harder to contend with. Very, very effective strategy when you put it all together. Like I said, a lot of it is about carrying his weight through the fight. Bigger they are, the more he wants him to carry him. You know, when we talk about the jiu-jitsu stuff at the end, we're going to talk about this, but, you know, he likes to get in top positions like half guard, top side control. He likes to get in that turtle position, and he likes to make them carry his weight. Most of his jiu-jitsu is about weight carrying because he wants to be able to blast them when they stand up so that when they get back up, you know, they start coming out to him like this and they pick up their hands the last second. Once you've done that, you know he's won. And he's done this successfully to a lot of guys. And it's a very effective strategy. So energy drain, when you're fighting a bigger fighter, is super, super important. Let's see. A lot of it, like I said, if he can survive round one, he pretty much wins most of his fights if he can survive round one against guys who have tremendous knockout power. But that's pretty much it for the energy drain. But what I want you to take away from this is if you do fight somebody bigger and heavier, make them miss. Work the body. Take them down. Make them work and put in a lot of effort on stuff. Make him chase you a lot. He'll do that a lot too, making him chase him. Use that stuff to your advantage because I'll tell you what, it works on bigger guys. They're going to get tired quicker. So anyway, that's part 2. Thank you. All right, part 3 is about applying and alleviating pressure and using that as a controlling technique to determine how the fight's going to go, and really more importantly to set up his retreating cross, which is devastating. He's got a lot of good knockouts on that. And so I want to kind of talk about what he does with the pressure system on here, because it's very, very valuable when you talk about drawing guys in. And what he does is this. He'll walk them up against the cage so that they don't have room to retreat. And he'll stay just on the outside, and then he'll use his jab mostly as a rangefinder and connect with a big cross. What you'll see him do a lot is a lot of top positional control when he gets in here. And he uses the jab cross repeatedly to find out what your reaction to it's going to be. And it's funneling. He's going to create a trigger to create a reaction so that he has a predictable thing that he can try to either counter or to exploit. And this is something he does really well, where once he throws his jab cross and he knows how you're going to react to it, now he can create the same trigger every time. And he has a predictable setup so that now it forces them into it. It's kind of the same thing as like if you're on the ground and I'm in a guard and I constantly am pulling on that sleeve to see how they move. Once I know how they move, I can exploit that and start sweeping in that direction every time. Or they start pulling back, sweeping the opposite direction. It's just action, reaction, reaction. That's all it is. But what he's looking for more than anything else, you know, this top position is great. And he will use this to get takedowns off of it as well once he has them backed up, because obviously once you get somebody backed up near the cage, it's much easier to finish a takedown. So that blast double, he gets them right up against the cage, he'll drive them up against the wall and clinch and do the energy drain and finish single legs and double legs from there. But what he really wants is for them to get frustrated because he's longer and he's always just sliding out and countering, right? He's always just out, right? And he wants this because he knows sooner or later they have to contend with this. So what do? They chase him. And at first it's going to look like he's running away with this long guard until they kind of get to the point where they're starting to stop the chase and he catches him real hard. Man, I cannot tell you how effective that is. And what it is that he's already a heavy hands guy. He's already got incredible punching power. But if you can get somebody running into your punch, it's an easy way to get a knockout. When we talked about Conor McGregor, it's a lot of his strategy. He backs up and he counters you as you drive in. Stipe does the same thing. He uses this long guard, and as you start to pressure in, pop. He catches that big cross and knocks you out. On some occasions, he's also used a Russian check hook or a Cuban check, and he'll just pop a corner as you're coming in so that he's drawing back and it looks like he's running away until he's not. Now, sometimes if he doesn't feel like the moment's right, he will just create space and reset and go back to his initial strategy, slipping and then coming out at an angle. But chasing him down is a recipe for disaster. Every guy who's tried it ends up eating big shots. Every single guy. Because he's never going to let you into a range where you're doing real damage. And as soon as you start to stop your motion, pop, he finishes you. Very, very effective strategy. So that ability to create the illusion of pressure and alleviating pressure and forcing you to try to blitz at them, man, if you can get somebody to force them into a blitz and then counter them as they come in, that's a really, really easy way to knock somebody out because you're taking all that energy they're using and drawing into it. Because guys get overconfident. Once they start feeling like they get shots, they want to start, barreling in. That is something that you can exploit because guys feel overconfident from there. And he does it really well where as they start to throw a shot, he backs away as they get overconfident and he turns back in and knocks them out. So that's the majority of what I wanted to talk about with that. But it's a very, very effective strategy. Controlling range, super important. If you watch my narrated sparring videos, I talk about this a lot. I'm always in range control. Now, I use a slightly different system where it's always about being just outside of their range and never letting them get into the pocket and stuff like that where I can always be in control. But he uses it differently where he stays just outside with hand range, where I stay just outside, use my kicks. He stays just outside, catches you and gets back out. Catches you and gets back out. Then you chase and he backs out and he knocks you out. Really, really nice strategy. And it plays to his strengths. All right, the final part of this is going to go pretty quick. There's not a lot to say. I just want to kind of touch on his clinching and takedowns and jiu-jitsu. The majority of it, like I said, is used to draw them out and to tire them out, rather. It's about energy bars, right? A lot of times he seems to favor the single leg from the outside. He'll get that, run the pipe. He'll do a blast double from the outside where he puts him up against the wall and he keeps driving. From the clinch, though, what you'll see a lot of is this. Shoulder in. He might get an underhook and maybe a wrist control, but he's doing a lot of short hooks, knees, and shoulder strikes. Why? He's not really looking to do that much damage. It's not like a guy who's doing a lot of dirty boxing. I know on the second Cormier fight, he did do the spinning elbow, John Jones style. And I think he feared because he saw John Jones use it on Cormier, he thought he might get lucky, but Cormier was kind of hip to it. But he'll do an underhook and a wrist control, and mostly what he's trying to do off the wall, he wants to wear them out, like we said. It's just about draining that energy. But what he will do from there is he will hit the single leg. He'll drop down, he'll get the single, run the pipe, put him on the ground. He'll get to here, he'll hit the double, and then put him on the ground. Once he gets on the ground, the majority of he's looking for is one of a couple things. He's going to go to half guard, and he's going to sit there and do this. And what he wants to do is make them work to get up. That's all he cares about. He's not looking for submissions and knockouts. Most of his strikes are pretty light, actually. He wants to do just enough striking so that the ref can't say he wasn't working. What he wants is for that guy on the bottom to work their ass off to get back up. It's about energy drain. And what happens a lot of times is from half guard, guys will start to turtle up to get up against the wall and try to stand up. He loves that. He'll put his wrap over the top, and he'll sit here and just put all his weight on him while he just does these little punches to the face. Not a ton of power, just enough to make him deal with it, but he lays on him. And they have to do all this work to get back up. And then he goes, okay, and he goes back to his cage grind. And then he does the same thing. And it's a repeated process of draining their energy. And if you want to know the major reason that he always wins, or mostly wins as the heavyweight champion over and over and over again, is energy drain. And this is a big part of it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this breakdown. Please, leave comments. If there's things that you think I'm missing or there's things that you'd like to see in here, let me know. If there's things that you said, you know what, I played this in my sparring and it worked out really well for me, let me know that as well. I know that tonight I'm going to be doing some sparring. I'll post it next Monday. We'll see how it goes for me. Some of these are big wins, some of these are not. So I always like to try these out myself and see what I can implement and add into my own system to make my system stronger. Because it's not about copying what other fighters do. It's about building your own system. And when I look at a guy like Stipe Miocic and I look at how he built a system around his strengths, I look at that and I say, how can I build my system to play to my strengths? And that's what we're really looking for on this. What can I take from this guy who's great at feinting? What can I take from this guy who's great at evading and counter-striking? What can I take from this guy who is impossible to get inside on? What can I take from this guy who has incredible footwork to leave and enter? All these things are important tools. So when I look at my own strengths and I go, well, I'm great at kicking. I'm an okay boxer. I'm not great, but I'm okay. But I'm excellent at kicking. I got a pretty decent takedown game, especially when there's strikes concerned. And my jiu-jitsu game is pretty decent. How do I build a system around these tools? Maybe yours are a little bit different. Figure out what they are and make it so that guys cannot exploit your weaknesses and you're always playing your kind of fight. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys.